morning, good afternoon, good evening. There is a Shona saying that Namanyangari Kutiru. And basically, it means the truth will always come out. What happened in the 2008 elections is one of the many very dark chapters in Zimbabwe's history. And the truth has been kept under wraps, but it is slowly coming out. Here is Dr. Ivo Mandaza giving his version of the events of that year.
I also know that Mugabe conceded defeat in 2008. He phoned Mbeki and Obasanjo to concede defeat. I hope that Thabo Mbeki and Obasanjo will one day make that public. But one of them, I won't say which one, told me that Mugabe phoned them that Saturday night and said, look, I lost election and I concede defeat. And I know that Mugabe stuck to his guns, was prepared to go. His wife was since bags packed to go somewhere on the following day when Mnangagwa and Chiwenga approached him and said, you stay where you are. And then they contrived the runoff, sadly with the help of South Africa. And runoff took place, very violent. 360 people were killed. The South African, I came here as part of a delegation to Cape Town to see members of the ANC. I don't want to mention names, they're my friends. I saw them, and through them, a cabinet committee subcommittee of South African cabinet was set up on the Zimbabwe issue. It was on the basis of that cabinet committee that South Africa did not recognize the runoff. And indeed, it was the basis of that committee that Thabo sent the generals to South Africa, to Zimbabwe. I met them, and I was one of the few to have read the report, because I was flying to Joburg in the company of General Romano, who was a friend. He passed away. And I also took people who had lost their hands in the violence to the South African embassy in Harare. And Romano broke down in tears. How can a liberation movement treat these people like that? He was a broken man. So there's no doubt at all here in South Africa as to the brutality of the regime in Harare. So it amazes me, it angers me, in fact, when I hear the nonsense coming out of people like Mbalula's mouth. They know it. And the report has never been published, the general's report, to this day. That tells you. Is it complicit behavior? I don't know. But to get back to 2008, the runoff took place. Mugabe was sworn in at midnight before boarding a plane with Mbeki to Sharm el-Sheikh. Ambassador, I forgot to mention that. Yes? I'm not talking about it was contrived, but clearly there was a definite plan to keep Mugabe in office. And it's no secret that I had Thabo speaking the other day, saying the Zimbabwean people came together to form the GNU. It's only half true. Morgan Tsvangirai was literally regimented into the GNU. That's a fact.
It is tragic that we had an armed struggle whose primary purpose was to end the white colonial oppression of the blacks, only to find ourselves in 1980 with new oppressors. Black, like you and me, but new oppressors nonetheless. Here is Mnangagwa giving his version of the events of 2008.
2008 patakaita ma-elections pakaposa papinda Tsvangirai ndandiri election agent yapresident. Results abuda tiri paparty headquarters vamutasa vanga vari secretary vedu veadministration vamutasa muripi ndafona ndiri kwarusapi komogwenda kwarusapi seka results achibuda kudai vanga aiwa zvako izvo Mnangagwa ndezvako endaenda kumusha ofisi vanga vabisa zvinhu zvavo zvose watofunga kuti zani yadini yaparara. President ofona zvakamira sei kati ndomamira zvakaita takatodini kateda sei manje mama ndikati abvudzai baba nditaurira baba gadzirai politburo cabinet musarangarira zvimwe zvinhu gadzirai chi cabinet asi nangoda kuti muzive kuti 2008 results abuda vamutasa vakatiza.
As a country we face a generational transition. Vana vesa vari kuma below 35, they are crying out for help. The country is in a mess. Arusurufaro. We know we are inheriting a mess. We know this country has been left with nothing.
I'm assuring you that starting from tomorrow, you'll see a different nation from what you have seen or read on the news about these results and everything. Where we are going ahead there, the situation will be very different. What we said to our people, they could not see with their own eyes. We are going to act as we see it fit. We are prepared to go the whole distance.
What went wrong with Zimbabwe? We have to ask ourselves that question. Zimbabwe is not the only country that gained its independence after a violent armed struggle. Why is it that other nations were able to transition from a violent armed struggle to become a healthy and functioning democracy? And we were not able to do that. I think the root, the genesis of our problem can be traced back to the decision to have the armed struggle in the first place. When that decision was being made, those who were involved and the people themselves should have asked themselves, what kind of leaders would an armed struggle throw up? And would those be the kind of leaders who would want to lead independent Zimbabwe? That should have been at the back of everyone's mind throughout the struggle for independence, more so at the dawn of our independence. In 1980, for the 1980 elections, Robert Mugabe and his colleagues attended the Lancaster House talks that produced the Constitution. One of the agreements there was that ZANU-PF and ZAPU would withdraw all their freedom fighters operatives from the field during the campaign period. Mugabe and company signed on the dotted line, agreeing to that. But by the time they got back to Zimbabwe, they changed their mind. Many of the ZANU-PF freedom fighters were left in the field. And their instructions was to tell the people that if ZANU-PF does not win the election, the Bush war would continue. ZANU-PF was more interested in winning power than in upholding the rights and freedoms of all Zimbabweans, including the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. The people voted to end the Bush war. And with that vote, they lost their right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. When Zandla operatives were left in the field and were making those threats, the alarm bells should have been ringing in all thinking Zimbabweans' mind, like church bells. What kind of leaders would an armed struggle throw up? And in this case here, we're getting the answer. The kind of leaders that our armed struggle threw up were the type who, having been pointing the gun at the white oppressors throughout the fight for independence, they were prepared to point the gun at the ordinary defenseless black Zimbabwean, to coerce them to give up their right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. We lost it. And within 3 years of the 1980 elections, with Mugabe and his colleagues in power, they set out to consolidate the armed grip on power. They launched the infamous Kokura-Wundi, whose primary purpose was to force the only other political party that formed a real challenge to ZANU-PF's hold on power, PF-ZAPU, led by the late Dr. Joshua Nkomo. They were coerced to sign the Unity Accord, unifying ZANU and ZAPU, which they did in 1987. And that cleared the deck as far as Robert Mugabe was concerned to launch the de facto one-party state that has ruled Zimbabwe with an iron fist to this day. Zimbabwe cannot escape the reality that we still have a party in the form of ZANU-PF that really believe that they, because they fought in the liberation war, they have the divine right to rule the country. We should stand up and say no to that. Failing to do so has not changed anything. One of the realities is a lot of the freedom fighters, those who fought in the liberation war, have come to believe this short-sighted Robert Mugabe and the co-leaders' mentality to the point that they honestly believe that if you fought in the liberation war, you are special. You deserve special treatment. Here is a very familiar face. Blessed Geza, underlying that very point.
Saka munowina sei imuchorerwa chinje.
aiwaga mirani kutaurire imwe zvinhu zvinoitika handii ndiri kutokutaurira kutaudza kuti hatina kupusaka because ndiri kutokutaurira kuti tozviziva takapusaka ndisikakutauriri zvese we'll deal with this situation at the appropriate time but ndiri kutotaura kuti commander Mnangagwa, right? Chiwenga, and right? Ngawa dissolve political bureau. Tikwane is, but it's true. Ngawa dissolve cabinet. Zinana Zembe, Vana Soda, Vadan. How about you tell about Nikupani? Vanakamba Muda, Vanan. Why do you hate your community? Kunema general, kunema retired CIO wakawanda, kunema retired commissioners of police and other senior officers wakawanda. Haladiwe.
Maybe the president is looking at capacity and capability.
Bullshit. When I'm grade 7, I know capacity and capability. Grade 7. What a beast you're going. Now I was Minister of State, Mangwana Provincial Minister. It's terrible. It's terrible. We are not apologetic about it. Children change. Turn out of Pinda, not out of the president, one was motor, but about you don't have a bodyguard.
But you've got your own cars. You've got a hotel at your house that you built in Sanyat. Why do you want all this?
I want to be rewarded as well. Not to be used like a political condom all the time. I'm not a political condom. And urukora wana mahia vaya na vamwa.
The truth of the matter is, Zimbabwe struggle through the kind of leaders who believe they have the divine right to rule the country. And this is why the country has been going round and round in circles. We cannot solve Zimbabwe's economic problems because those in power believe they have the divine right to rule. Excuse me. Of course they don't. The right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country is more than a right. It is the essence of good governance. Every Zimbabwean has a right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. ZANU-PF has never held free, fair, and credible elections. When you listen to people like Mnangagwa, what they did in 2008, that man does not deserve to be in State House. He should have been arrested and sent to prison for that. What happened in 2008 is one of those political situations that has got far-reaching ramifications. The echoes of the Operation Mafotera Papi, the brutality of the violence, has meant that in Zimbabwe, there really cannot be free, fair, and credible elections because people fear that ZANU-PF, if they lose, they'll punish them again. We are a nation living in fear. We need to resolve this problem. We need to address it face on. We need to tell people like Mnangagwa that we want to know what happened in 2008. Why did Mugabe concede defeat? Why did other people like Didmas Mutasa pack their bags and took all their things from their office and left their offices? What had happened? You contrived the results that were announced. And then during the runoff, you punished Zimbabweans for having dared to vote freely, undermining the very essence of democracy. How can such a man be considered suitable material to go to State House, to be president? Someday the truth will come out. And I hope that justice will prevail. Those responsible for the barbarism of 2008 will be held to account. We can't be a nation living forever in fear. We need to confront and deal with the causes of the fear. We know that 2008 was one of the darkest chapters in Zimbabwe's post-independence electoral history. The black box must be opened. The truth must come out. And those responsible for it must be held to account.